Okay, so I bought the Samsung CRG9 monitor, and it's a 32:9 aspect ratio monitor. Essentially, it's the size of two 27-inch 16:9 monitors side by side with no bezel. And it is a piece of shit, but let me go into the details here. So basically, Final Fight supports any aspect ratio as long as it's 1:1 aspect ratio or greater. It doesn't support vertical aspect ratio, so you can see it here. Supports 32:9 perfectly. That's all fine and dandy. And it was the kind of the primary reason I actually got this monitor. But there are a lot of advantages to having a monitor like this, because it is basically just like having two monitors with no bezel. That's the main gimmick. But here's the breakdown though. So it's 5120 by 1440, which once again is just basically like two 2560 by 1440 monitors side by side. It's one of those fake HDR monitors where they say it's HDR, but it really isn't, because effectively you have to run with compressed colors to actually get the full refresh rate. It does support up to 120 hertz refresh rate, and that's fine, but the problem is that you can't do 10-bit color and uncompressed color at the same time. So you have to drop down to, like 422 or some garbage like that. But it's garbage though, because, so here's the thing, if you don't know, if you are running with compressed colors, like anything other than 444, anything other than RGB, basically fonts in Windows look terrible. It's fine for like a Blu-ray player or something where the videos are all compressed to shit anyway. But when you need to have fonts look good and all of that, it's just a no-go. So basically, the mode that I'm running in this video is 8-bit color, 120 hertz refresh rate at 5120 by 1440. And I don't really mind that so much, because I mean, when it all boils down to it, HDR support is spotty at best. I personally don't care about HDR. That isn't really my problem with the monitor. So just some impressions here, though. It does, have a kind of, spotty backlight. I'm not that impressed with the backlight. I can see definite splotches here and there. I was very disappointed in that. And even though it's not a knock against the model itself, basically this monitor had a cluster of dead pixels. I mean like as if it looks like somebody just marked a portion of the monitor with a black pen. It's atrocious and incomprehensible. So build quality is kind of flaky. The stand is a cheap plastic piece of shit. Feels like crap. Here's World of Warcraft running 32:9. Look at that fucking field of vision. I mean, this is kind of a game changer. If you're a World of Warcraft hardcore player, 32:9 is the real deal. I mean, this is just me fucking around in trial mode because I don't have an active subscription on WoW. But I mean, look at that fucking field of vision. You can see everything. It's amazing. Yeah, if I were really still into WoW, I would be all over that shit. I would absolutely demand a monitor like this. Yeah, I mean, 32:9 is not really a gimmick in WoW. It's actually useful. I mean, I'm just imagining if you're running a raid or something. I mean, you could see everything. You could spot people standing in void zones. You could spot people, doing things. You could see if anybody needed help, if you were tanking, whatever. It's really that's really amazing. That aspect ratio is awesome there. But I do want to point something out about WoW though. So recently, because Activision is a shitty, lazy company, they dropped support for full screen exclusive mode in World of Warcraft's client, and so basically you're stuck with a windowed mode. And even though this monitor does have Freesync support, and NVIDIA and AMD both support Freesync, the dirty little secret about variable refresh, though, is that it basically doesn't really work that well in windowed mode. And quote-unquote full-screen mode in World of Warcraft is essentially just a borderless windowed mode. And so it isn't ultra smooth. Like, when I still had an active WoW subscription, and before they removed the full screen, the true exclusive full screen mode, it was buttery smooth, and it isn't as good now. So check out Diablo 3. See how they didn't even see how like the corners of the screen are messed up because the aspect ratio is so fucking wide. They don't even have graphics for the corners when you're logging into the game and choosing the game. It's fucking nuts. Diablo 3 is also a pretty amazing game for 32:9 aspect ratio because you can seriously see shit you've never seen before in the maps. I mean, I only really played it briefly, but I mean, look at that fucking field of vision. I mean, you can see vendors off in the corner, when you're in the center of the town. It's insane. And look at all that detail. See how you can see the end of the map there? That like the map, like it doesn't even have graphics for it. It just gets cut off. And you can see like a little pop in there as you get close. I mean, you can see everything. The field of vision is absolutely nuts. So, I mean, basically, I like the aspect ratio. I think that it's actually really valuable. What it really boils down to is, does the software you run actually support it? And basically, the cooperative or like non-competitive Blizzard games. I apologize. The Activision games actually support 32:9 pretty well, as far as I can tell. So that's nice. And so if you're a big, Activision guy, you're probably okay with 32:9, but basically almost everything else I played, you essentially have to install hacks and workarounds to even get 32:9. It's a fucking joke. As usual, open source software, passion project software, all supports 32:9 aspect ratio perfectly. Most of the commercial shit is, only really supporting 16:9 well. But I do think it's fascinating, though, like playing Diablo 3, running around, seeing the shit that you couldn't see before. And when I ran a Greater Rift, it was really interesting how, there's almost like, a fog of war effect in Diablo 3, where if an enemy is like way far off, he's actually dark, and he gets lighter as you get closer. It's really interesting. So here's Samurai Showdown 2, and this is just to give you perspective. Look at all that fucking dead space, and look at the splotchy backlight. Look at all this fucking dead space when you're running a 4:3 aspect ratio game on a 32:9 monitor. I mean, literally, it's almost, like this is almost like three, 4:3 monitors side by side, nearly. Like if you played, Darius games or shit like that, it would pretty much be full screen. And you're going to see some more MAME stuff a little later here. But one thing I want to point out, though, I can definitively say that G-Sync is better than Freesync because I noticed. You probably are aware that variable refresh monitors let you run games in MAME perfectly smoothly, even if they run at weird refresh rates like 62 hertz or 58 hertz or 57 hertz, whatever. But Freesync is not as good as G-Sync because I noticed micro, like sub-frame flickering irregularities that are not there with G-Sync. So basically, if you're a big arcade MAME person, you want a G-Sync monitor. It's not even an option. Fucking G-Sync. So that's kind of another nail in the coffin for this monitor. Arcade games are more important to me than contemporary games, and so that's kind of a deal breaker. I need G-Sync to be perfect, and I'm kind of disappointed in AMD that or Samsung, whoever's fault it was, that this thing didn't quite measure up to it. But I will say, though, input lag is actually really good. It's really responsive. Because in my Final Fight remake is actually a really good test for it because the game is basically like next frame response. So it's really obvious when there's like monitor input lag, and input latency is actually really fucking good on this monitor with FreeSync enabled. Yeah. So of course, GZ Doom and all that stuff, it actually supports 32:9 natively. It is fucking awesome. It's amazing seeing all that fucking shit in Doom. I mean, basically for everything that supports it, it's amazing. It is a unique, novel experience. I can't express in a video or in words, like the feeling that you get because you really do have to experience it for yourself. Like you don't watching this video on a 16:9 monitor, you just don't get the impact of how fucking wide it is and how large it is. I mean, I'm pretty fucking jaded. I've pretty much seen it all when it comes to games, And the first time I fired this thing up and looked at Final Fight, it took my breath away. It's fucking amazing. But like I said, the bottom line is you don't get true uncompressed color HDR support because the DisplayPort spec doesn't support it yet. So that's fucking primitive and lame. The backlight is kind of splotchy. There are viewing angle problems that you can definitely see color shift, in the corners of the screen. It's definitely there. I mean, and basically, if you aren't exactly just like dead on eye level with this thing, the color shift is fucking hideous. And so this is a VA panel. Later in the year, LG is actually going to release another 32:9 aspect ratio 5120 by 1440 monitor, but it's an IPS panel instead of a VA panel. And honestly, for my money, I think IPS is better for games. I really do. Like, the colors pop more, and I think they tend to be a little bit less late, a little less laggy, have a little less ghosting. I think that the LG monitor is going to end up being better. And especially, I think if it's an actual like native G-Sync monitor, I think it might actually be better. So that's something to keep in mind. Even if you're in the market for the 32:9, I would seriously consider waiting for the LG one coming out at the end of the year, because I think that IPS is actually better. So here's X-Men 6-player, and this basically just tells you that it's like it isn't quite wide enough to take up the entire screen. 32:9 aspect ratio. It comes kind of close, but there's still some pillar boxing. You'll also notice when you run shaders in MAME, see that thin line right in the middle of the screen? That's because due to the way that that shaders work in MAME, the shaders are per monitor, not per screen. And so there's actually like a little subtle artifact where the pixel shader begins, at the beginning of the monitor, and that's and also where it ends. And that's why you can see that little line in between there. So basically, if you're going to do this kind of setup on a computer, you actually want to run RetroArch, because RetroArch applies its shaders on the screen level, not the game's monitor level. Now, finally, here is the fucking shitty. Look at that! Look at that cluster of dead fucking pixels. I mean, it looks like somebody marked it with a fucking pen. I mean, really, there were like 20 dead pixels on this monitor. It is absolutely fucking insane. The quality control is a goddamn joke.